Hey everyone, it's Dez and Marco with After School with the Admins. Thank you for tuning in. Please like and subscribe, share with a friend. Here's our newest episode.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of After School with the Admins. I'm your host, Marco Turillo, and I'm here with my co-host.
Des Caldwell, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you all for joining us. We're here for another great episode. Marco, take it away.
Sure. So today we are joined by Mahri Wrightington. She is the owner, founder, and operator of PD Monster. Mahri, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Marco. Thanks, Des. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Great. Well, we'd like to always start with our very first question that we always ask, which is tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey into education and where it got you to today, to where you are now the person who runs PD Monster.
Sure. So I, went to college, kind of traditional trajectory, and got my BA in psych. And education was in my mind, but I didn't really know what role. And as I was exploring grad school, because once I realized you have a BA in psych, you can't do a whole lot with that. So I was like, all right, what am I going to do next? So, a couple of years after college, I was looking into grad schools and didn't even know school psychology was a career. Like I'd never heard of it. I never, I guess, interacted with one that I knew of in my educational career. So it was just a brand new field to me. And I just got really excited about it. I had some teaching assistant experience. My job in college, my campus job, was working at the preschool, which was so cool. I was a student teacher at the preschool. So I loved working with kids. I loved education, but I wanted to use my psych degree. And then this little miracle of school psychology kind of came to me. I didn't know it existed and then found it and was so excited. So I spent many years in school getting ready for that career. You don't have to have a doctorate to do school psychology, but I did enter a doctorate program. So I was in school for a long time. And yeah, I kind of stumbled into it. It wasn't a super intentional move. I was just like, yeah, this thing exists. And it seemed like a good fit for me. And it really was. I really got to use parts of my brain that I just really enjoyed. And I didn't anticipate that I would find my work passion in working with the adults. And that was kind of a surprise to me. So we all enter education with some love of kids. Of course you do, right? I mean, everyone has some story that's like, oh, my niece or nephew, or, oh, I loved kids, or babysit, whatever it was, right? So I didn't anticipate that I would find my passion in the coaching and in the systems design. And that is just, I don't know, that's what happened. And so I loved being a school psychologist, but I was always kind of tempted to the bigger picture, especially professional development, to be honest, was one of the things that drove me crazy that I wanted to fix. I'm a fixer, right? So I wanted to fix it. And I was always one of the people who many of us hopefully can connect with this, sitting in the back of the room as far away from the presenter as I could be. This was pre-smartphones, right? So doodling and just finding ways to entertain myself and just being really bored with the professional development. And I think at the time I thought it was just me because my first job was in a K-8 district. So I was one school psychologist in a K-8 district. So I didn't have any colleagues in the same role, right? I had lots of colleagues, but no one else in the same role. So I didn't really ask the question of did anyone else like that PD? But once I started to have those conversations with my colleagues, I realized it wasn't just me. Everybody hated PD. That was a problem, right? It was everyone was annoyed by it. Everyone hated it. One of the things I start my trainings with now is I always share some PD memes at the beginning of trainings to just kind of disarm the audience and say I get it. I'm not a different person because, I'm up here. I was the same bored. I'm the same person who was bored in the audience before, and I haven't forgotten that. So that was probably more than you wanted to that first question, but school psych with some teaching experience and led me to kind of do bigger things in education because I wanted to fix broken things, and PD was broken and still is in many, many places.
And to be fair, no, it wasn't too much, because that's really what we were looking for. Because, we find it always interesting. Whenever we ask that question, everyone seems to have a very similar answer. Now, whether it is that they didn't care about education, I shouldn't say care about, but they weren't thinking education in their life. They were just like, it was just something, and somehow it called to them. It found their way to them. Something happened. An individual told them it's what you need to do. But everyone seems to find their way into it that are meant to be in it. And then the second part of it is very true. I think all of us have sat in a professional learning where we've sat there going, why am I here? And or sitting there going like, this is just mind-numbingly bad. Where it's like, sometimes they have the black and white PowerPoint on and you go, oh no, like this is not how we're going to start this. And we have another 2 hours left of this. Or they're going to be like, let's all get up and let's do an icebreaker. And right away, it's like, okay, we're about to have a rough one to start this.
Literally.
So we've all been sitting through those moments, and we've all been it. And I think probably I'd say a reoccurring issue with all educators is that we all try to be fixers. We all think like, if we see something, we can't look away and say like, we can't, it's meant to stay that way. We try our best to try and fix, work with, do something, because it's in us to want to try and help someone be better or something be better. So I think you see that a lot in all those aspects when we're in education.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for me, the thing I hated the most is being read to, right? Like, dude, I got my degree. Like I can do the reading.
Yeah.
Send it to me. I got you, right? Even though we probably wouldn't do the reading because other things get in the way. But anyway, I digress. So I guess, how do you go from, all right, you were I use the word singleton, when you don't have someone that you can collaborate with, who's doing the same thing that you're doing. How do you go from that to, you know what, I'm going to provide PD on, all the topics you provide PD on. What was that transition like?
Yeah, I'm still, it's a good question. But I'm going to step away from the word transition, because I think I'm still in it. Like I'm still learning, I'm still developing. And so I think to be a good educator, and I use that term inclusively, right? So I don't mean teacher. When I say educator, I mean any role, right? Administrators, paraprofessionals, school psychologists, everybody. I think to be a good educator, you have to, or I hope you identify as a lifelong learner. I think people do, even if you haven't said that about yourself before, right? That people in education think education's important. I don't know how you could be an educator and not think it's important, right? And so lifelong learning is part of my gig. It's part of my identity. It's just part of who I am, is to nerd out about things and learn things. And so I think the approach that I take to professional development is, first of all, keeping it practical. Nobody wants to sit through theory for hours. Nobody does. We want it. Education is a super hard job, whatever role you have. Everyone's drowning. There's so many reasons for that. That's probably its own show, but we could talk about that for a long time. So everybody is drowning, and they need and deserve practical things that they can use immediately to improve their practice. And that's kind of my whole philosophy with this business. So to answer your question more specifically, is I find problems in education because I consult with schools all the time. And so those aren't trainings necessarily, right? I'm coaching, I'm meeting, I'm designing systems, and I hear and see for myself the current problem or the current whatever it is that is missing. And that is kind of what fuels me. And I say, I didn't learn that in grad school either. And you know what? Educators should know how to do that. And then I dive in and I create and I learn and I read and I go to trainings, and then I try to, make it palatable, make it just like it's on a platter. Like here it is. I did the work for you, which I think as a PD presenter is my job. I am, informed by research. I do the reading, but I don't expect people on the floor, right? People who are in those positions to, like, you kind of made a joke about it before, Des, about like, oh, we probably wouldn't get to all the reading anyway. Of course you wouldn't, right? That's my job, is to do the reading for you and then bring it to you in a presentation, right? In a discussion, in a meeting, whatever the, PD is, because I'm big on PD not being, it doesn't always have to be like a stand and deliver training to be considered professional development. So that's my job. And so I hope I'm answering your question, but so I don't know that it was like something I transitioned into. It's something I am like always becoming. I'm always learning so that I can say, here's the new thing that everyone needs to know. And it's not necessarily the new thing. I'll give you an example. A handful of years ago, we were not talking about attendance as much as we're talking about attendance. The pandemic, and I know we're so sick of talking about the pandemic, but sometimes we have to, and I have to right now. The pandemic doubled our chronic absentee rates across the country, and we haven't come down from that. So before the pandemic, I wasn't getting a lot of calls or questions or, a lot of need to talk about attendance, but now hugely important. So it's not like it's a new thing, right? But the statistics are showing us we've got to work on that right now. And so MTSS for attendance is huge in my life right now. It's probably a third of the work that I'm doing is helping schools with attendance rates, because they're really low right now.
So that's a situation where I think, as a school leader, I don't know the answer. If we did, then we wouldn't have an attendance issue, crisis, one might say. But there are topics that, as a school leader, that I am familiar with, that I have found success, and that I feel that I could lead that professional learning or professional development on my own. Mm-hmm. What do you find when, in your work, what are leaders missing, and why is it beneficial to us? If I think I know this topic, why is it beneficial for me to look to you and say, actually, let's let you lead this work?
Sure. Well, sometimes there's just benefit in a different voice, right? Someone saying it in a different way, someone using different words, using different visuals. Sometimes it could be time, right? You'd love to do everything that you have the capacity to do, but you don't always have the time to do it. So I think sometimes there's just a benefit to having an extra person or a different person leading the discussion. But in terms of things that are sometimes missed by leaders, I think these are things I talk about right away. If someone's going to hire me, I talk about these couple of things that I'm going to share now right away. So one is thinking a training, like a one and done, right? Training is going to solve any problems. And I'm going to tell you in your audience right now, it's not going to. And I'm saying that as someone who does them for a living, and I need schools to hire me, but I want to be part of an initiative, because one and done, flash in the pan things, we've all experienced that. We've all gone through that. We can all get into our staff members' heads about that and know that they're thinking the same thing, like, this will go away too, right? And I want to help leaders bring things that shouldn't go away because they're that important, but also help them be part of a bigger discussion. So I often asking leaders, what have you talked about in this arena in the past? What did you call it? Because I'll change the name of my presentation to that, because that's what's important, that the staff is seeing the connection to, this isn't new. This is part of what we've been doing in the past, and this is a piece of it, or this is an extension of it, or this is a new way to think about it maybe, but it's something that we need for X, Y, and Z reason. So I think that's one thing, is being a bigger part of an initiative, not trying to say, oh, we have a PD day. Oh yeah, that would be good. Let's throw that in there. our educators, our staff deserve better than that. They need to be, heard and seen and valued. We've got so many issues in education, and it's a lot of them many of them fall on our leaders, right? But a lot of the problems fall on our teaching staff and our staff in general. And I think PD is not like, I say, like, when I get stressed about my work, I'm like, my work is not life or death work. It's important work, but I'm not performing surgery, right? So like, we have a minute to sit and think about what's going to get us to our end goal. So that's one answer to your question of what do we miss is sometimes let's couch it in the big picture to make it palatable, to make it understandable, to make it usable, to make it friendly for everyone. That's one really big thing. I think the other thing that admins sometimes miss is their own role in the professional development. Whether or not they're leading it, I find a huge role of the admin to be, even if you already know it, to learn with the staff. Super important. And because the staff, some of them are not learning it for the first time either, right? We can't, when we're doing a big presentation, when it is one of those, everyone's in the same room, everyone's at different levels. There could be people who know more than you as the leader sitting there, right? But the important part of engaging in the learning with your staff, speaking to your leaders who are listening here, the importance of that is it's following up the learning with support and with teachable moments, with, when, 2 weeks after a training, a staff member comes to you like, hey, help me with this problem. And if it's somehow related to that training, that's part of your initiative to say, hey, let's together try this strategy that we learned. Let's together, not to be like, well, did you try that thing from the training? But, together saying like, hey, I haven't used this strategy either, but I think this is what we were talking about at that training. How about we try that? So if we aren't supporting staff with the same like solutions that we're learning together to be developed professionally, then like, why did we learn it, right? We should be learning it. And so I try when I'm hired by a leader to kind of talk to them about the importance of their participation, knowing that I'm coming from both perspectives. I spent a long time as a school psychologist. I forget if I mentioned, but I spent a long time as a school administrator as well. And so I have both of those perspectives. I think I didn't say that before. So I did spend some years as a special education director and then as a clinical director in a different school or supervising a very large staff of clinicians. So, coming from those two perspectives, I know how important it is for the leader to be there. I also know sometimes time-wise, it's really hard to say, okay, I'm going to sit in this, 4-hour training today with my staff when I have XYZ, meetings, phone calls, report to write for the Board of Ed, and you have all this stress on you. But the fact that you've committed money and all of the time that your staff is sitting in that room, it is worth your time too, to be in there. And again, I want your listeners to really hear the point that it's not about you have to learn it, right? It's about you might know it or you might not, depending on the topic, right? But you need to be part of the group. And from a presenter's perspective, I know the difference when an admin is really involved and invested and sharing in the growth process versus like, have a good time learning. We might not ever talk about this again. Those are two totally different pathways that training can take. It can either really support the school's growth or it can be kind of neutral. It's not usually ever going to hurt, like training's not invasive enough to like hurt anyone, I don't think, but it can be kind of neutral or null, just not that helpful. And I do think leaders have a big role in that.
So I've got a couple questions to kind of go off of it. They feed off, I think, each other. First question is, do you find that you usually work with the entire districts or specific schools within the district? So like, do districts usually hire you as they hire PD Monster, then PD Monster kind of works and spreads out through each of the schools, or is it one school will hire you for it? Second part to that question, and I'm just trying to get an understanding from kind of the conversations that you've had so far, do you present to the school or do you teach the admin and like select staff to be able to present that, or you do both? And the last part to that is, which is probably the hardest one, is the dreaded turnkey, which as this was a statement that literally probably sunk many school districts, of we're going to have you come in, you're going to teach a group of people, and they're going to turnkey it to their buildings. After 2 hours of learning it, they're going to now officially be able to be the experts in it and teach it across the way, which I love the fact that you said that you should be as an admin, which is something I know personally I say to my staff all the time, like, I'm doing this with you. I might be the leader, I might be the one in front of it, but I'm going to be here with you. So like, I don't have the answers on some of these things, but I'll figure it out with you. Like when districts tell admins or whoever the staff is they want to do it, they are now the experts because they've been through one PL of it. It's time to say, now you have to do that. So what are your thoughts on those three questions? If you need me to say any again, I have no problem saying it again.
No, I had jotted them down while you were saying, so I was like, I'm not going to remember 3 questions. Halfway through some of the questions one time, I'm like, did I answer it? I don't know. So, okay. All right, I can do this. So I'll talk more about it, but the quick answer to your first 2 questions is both for both. But let me talk about it. So do I teach districts or schools? Both. Do I have a preference? I sure do. And I bet you know what it is. I love when it's the initiative, right? When it's we're committing to this as a district, but sometimes I work with one school district. So I guess it's the difference in, whatever your community is. But yeah, sometimes I'm working with just one school in the district. And when it goes well, that sometimes leads to, hey, now we want to bring the middle school on. Hey, now we want to bring the high school on, right? But I sure do love it when it's a district initiative because I know they've already thought about that. They've already said, we know we need to see growth in this area. We know that, this is something we've never dealt with before, and now we're dealing with it a lot. Like attendance is an example of that, right? I would say behavior is sometimes an example of that, but behavior is a really big one that's pretty consistent across schools. But sometimes there's a new behavior that they're saying, oh, okay, we've got new things coming up and we need some help with that. And then you also asked, do my notes make sense? Oh yeah, I know the next one. So do I train to the whole staff or kind of I call it a train the trainer model? And I do both. I do have some suggestions when it's the train the trainer model. Sometimes we get to that because of simply time, right? That there's just, how are we going to get this to all the staff? Well, we only have a few PD days a year and they're already taken up with the reading curriculum initiative. So we really want to do this, attendance thing or this behavior thing or this trauma informed training, but we don't know how we're going to get it to everyone. So I have done lots of train the trainer, and I think I found some ways to make it work really well because I really like the wording that you use, Marco, that you're going to a training does not make you an expert. And I'm not saying that, looking down on the people who are trying to do that. We're all just trying to help, right? But it's stressful for the people who are put in that position to say, now you have to stand in front of the crowd. And I find that people might have different opinions about this, but it's not necessarily the presentation that's the difficult part. It's answering the questions. It's answering the what ifs. It's answering the, well, I have a kid who, and it's not only the content expertise, but you also have to be really comfortable public speaking to do that. And so sometimes we ask staff members who don't want to say no to us, and they're like, okay, I'll do that. But they're terrified and they don't really want to be in front of the staff. And it's super different being a public speaker in front of 25 fifth graders every day as a teacher. That's different than standing in front of your whole staff, all of your colleagues who you feel judged, and my words and my, oh my gosh, everyone's looking at me. That is, public speaking is one of the #1 adult fears. And so I think we have to kind of honor that if we're doing a train the trainer model. I think we really want to think about staff who are willing and comfortable and who actually signed up for that, as opposed to hey, we think you'll be great at this. Here you go. And they don't want to disappoint us or say no to us, but then are super stressed about that. So it's more than just the content expertise. It's also thinking on your feet and, having the background experience. One of the things I've committed to, I don't train things that I've never experienced. I just won't do it because I have done it in the past and it was really uncomfortable. I couldn't be as good as I can be because I didn't have any anecdotes. I didn't have any personal knowledge about the situation. So I won't stand in front of a crowd and talk about things. I can stand in front of a crowd and talk about the wealth of experience that I have because I have a 20-year career in education, from lots of different, and actually if I throw on the before my doctorate in school psych, even more years of, teaching preschool. I taught college before I was a school psychologist. When I was getting my doctorate, there's lots of opportunities to teach when you're getting your doctorate. So I, had lots of like college teaching experience. I had the preschool teaching experience, and I had actually every other grade did some summer jobs, and my first job right after college was a teaching assistant position for students with special needs. So, with all that experience, and then with my school psych and admin jobs, usually I can find something that I'm like, oh, I have experienced this. But if I haven't, I just won't do it because I think you need to be not only the content expertise and then all the other things, but all of that. Your audience is looking at you. They want to learn from you, and the audience isn't going to learn from me if I don't really have the chops. And I think that's super important. So the last piece of the question that I want to get to is what helps when you're doing that train the trainer model? Because I think it is a legitimate thing to do. I think you just have to think about the ifs for staff, especially the things I talked about. But I think doing it in small increments makes sense. So I actually am engaged with a school right now in Connecticut where I'm doing this train the trainer model. And what I'm doing is I'm working with the principals and assistant principals. And it's about attendance is on my mind because I'm doing so much of this work. So we're doing some attendance MTSS. And the tier 1 part, we want to teach the staff. We want to talk about what are the things to say when students are absent and then come back. There are things to say and things not to say. So I'm helping by designing the visuals, designing the training. And then I'm sharing it with them, and we meet like on, virtually. We meet, and I kind of share the visuals and they just do it at staff meetings. So it's like a little 10 or 15-minute presentation, but I model it first. So I say, okay, here are the strategies that you're going to teach the staff this week. And it's small bites, right? It's just little bits of information. So they don't have to be the content expert because they're rolling out strategies. So, and, they have some chops, of course, to handle some what ifs and whatever. And we talk about those in the train the trainer training. But I find that doing it in the small bites and having the visuals ready to go for them, it's not that they sit through a training and then have to create their own training. They sit through me modeling a very short training that's concrete. I explain it, I model it, and then they have the time to talk to me, ask me questions, and then they have the next, month or a few weeks or whatever to, at a staff meeting, roll it out, and then we meet again to do the next section. So I'm finding those things are helpful, like having the things prepped, making it super concrete, having visuals ready for them to use, and doing it in small bites.
Thank you.
What do you think? Did we get to all of it, Marco?
No, you definitely got to each part of it.
Okay.
One thing I'm just going to say is a little side thing for anyone who may be in a state that doesn't know what MTSS is. And I only say that because we have, as we've learned through some of the interviews that we've had, everyone has their own ways of saying things. Some are still doing things that, other states aren't doing anymore or saying it a different way. So when you think of MTSS, it's multi-tiered systems of support. It's pretty much the artist formerly known as SRBI, which was scientific research-based interventions. So we think about it, it's just the different names that we just change as we go along the way. But just to have for individuals who might not have known what that meant or hasn't got a chance to read up on that part just yet.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. And I just want to throw in my opinion about it. I like MTSS the best of all the acronyms that, there's PBIS, SRBI, RTI, like all these different acronyms that refer to the triangle, right? The tiered supports. And I just like MTSS the best because it says what it is. Response to intervention doesn't explain what the system is, right? You still have to, if you said like RTI to your, spouse at dinner who's not in education, you'd have to then say, oh, this is what this is. But multi-tiered systems of support, I feel like, that it's the one that the most states use, but also I feel like it's the best descriptor of what it is. So anyway, just had to throw that in there. So yes, thank you for describing or defining the acronym.
No worries. Does it sound like you had a question about to ask?
So I was not sure if we were ready to shift. I just wanted to talk classroom management.
Sure.
Because so I'm just thinking some things, are building based, some things are individual teacher based. And so I'm wondering, in your work, I guess, if you're working with the school, when do you determine that, this is tier 1 and, everybody in the school benefits from this, and, maybe you're talking to the leadership team and saying, this is really where we need to go, or, we need to look at specific folks and, figure out what needs to be done in those spaces. And, I don't know if that's a different tier of support or if it's a different form of support. And then with staff that just, don't see what the issue is. When we go into classrooms, let me speak for myself. When I go into classrooms to give feedback, I'm looking for the most powerful piece of feedback that will impact them positively the most. When you're providing the support, how do you help folks that can't see that or who don't see that?
Sure. All right. You guys are the kings of multi-part questions. I'll do the best I can here. So yeah. All right. So I think, one of my favorite things to do with schools is to help them build what I call we change names all the time. And that's because I want the district or school to pick the name of the initiative, right? But I tend to call it shared practices. I love building shared practices at the tier 1 level for schools to use. And I find them, I think just, you said it well, Des, where are we going to get the biggest bang for our buck? Where are we going to see growth? Where are we going to see tangible evidence of wow, it feels better in here. It feels safer in here. It feels, more positive climate going on in here. And I think one of the places that we can always get bang for our buck is in what I call shared practices. And so I have a toolkit of shared practices, but it's not always the same, but I have a bunch that I've learned and that I've used and that I've seen work in action. And I could give you some examples of those as we chat. But things that have a lot of power when everybody does them. So I'll give you an example. So one of the ones that I teach, and the term I use for it is the rule of 1. And I created this, I already named it, when I was a school administrator. And part of my journey was kind of part-time consulting and part-time admin. I know those jobs don't usually exist, but I did have one. It was amazing. And so I was able to kind of build PD Monster while I was still working in the schools. And it was an amazing kind of it was an amazing few years because I was able to kind of trial things that I was learning about and creating. And so one of the things that I realized I was doing poorly as an administrator was when I would kind of be walking down the hall and would see a staff member and a student engaged in some sort of discussion outside of a classroom door, right? Sometimes it was power struggle. Sometimes I thought they were doing fine, but I wanted to, going back to that, we're fixers here in education, right? And I was just wearing that hat. My fixer hat was on and I'm walking down the hall. And if I wasn't on my way to a meeting, I had a moment to support, I would talk to the student who maybe not always had a good relationship with, but in moments that I'm thinking of, I was like, hey, I know the student well. I think I could help. And I would say, hey, Johnny, I just saw you, buddy. You were doing fine. What's going on here? And I would accidentally restart the behavior, right? They would then want to explain to me the problem and, and she's blah, blah, blah. And they'd be complaining about the teacher. And I was starting it all over again. And I didn't mean to be unhelpful, but I was being unhelpful. And so I created the rule of 1 and we started using it at that school. And the rule of 1 was when students are escalated in any way, right? Or emotional, whatever word you want to put in there. I use the word escalated. When students are escalated, they benefit from seeing one face, one adult face, one adult face, one adult voice, one adult message. And so here's how the rule of one works. If you are in the situation like me, that either you're the administrator, it's a very good rule for administrators to abide by, but it could be paraprofessional and teacher. It could be two teachers in the same room co-teaching, just two adults in the same space, right? Could be in the cafeteria, it doesn't have to be a classroom. Wherever you are, the rule is whoever is already talking to the student, that's their choice to keep their power or pass their power. So remember, face, voice, message. So we have to be, so if someone's already like Des, if I'm walking down, I walk down the hall, I see you having a little something with a student. I am not, let's make Marco the student. I'm not going to say, hey, Marco, I'm going to look at you and say, can I help? If I have time to help, right? And you can say, because you have to know that what I'm saying to you right now is, hey, rule of one, you keeping it or you giving it to me? I have time to help. And you say right in front of the student, no, thanks, Dr. Wrightington. I am all set. And I say, okay, bye. And if Marco starts to say, yeah, but he wants to pull me into it, I have to use my social skills and get out of that. I'm not going to ignore Marco. I'm not going to just walk away. I'm going to say, hey, bud, Mr. Caldwell has got you right now. I'll check in with you later. And I get out of there. And so I don't create a problem. But if, Des, you have a class to get back to and you're like, ugh, thank God someone else is here, right? You might say, hey, Dr. Wrightington. And now the next part's really important because face and voice is pretty clear, right? I can't talk to the student till you give me permission to use my face and voice. But you have to give me your message before you can leave. Otherwise, I'm going to do whatever I think. If you want me to do what you think, you have to tell me. So you might say to me, hey, and right in front of the student, because what I really want to encourage people not to do is go whisper in front of the student, but they can't hear you. That is going to escalate them through the roof most of the time, right? So don't do that. Don't try to be sneaky. Don't make eyes at each other. Don't, use code signals. Just right in front of the student. Des might say to me, hey, Dr. Wrightington, yeah, you know what? Marco and I were talking about, it's silent reading time and Marco was supposed to pick a book, but he really wanted to draw right now. And it's not time for drawing. And so Marco, it looks like Dr. Wrightington's ready to support you. When you guys are ready to come in, pick that book, I'll be so happy to see you. And now you get out of there. You have passed me your message. The one thing I'm not going to do is come into your room and say, hey, Marco and I talked and I think drawing's okay right now. I am not going to do that. It's not appropriate for me to nix what you said, right? And no matter the role, whether I'm taking over from a paraprofessional, a teacher, an administrator, I'm going to, as your colleague, back up your message. So getting back to the big point of the question, that is an example of a shared practice. And do you see how that really is a classroom management strategy? We could use it outside of classrooms, right? But it is a strategy. It's a response strategy. What am I going to do when kids are already escalating or already we've hit an obstacle? It's not a prevention strategy, and classroom management needs both, right? We need ways to respond and we need ways to prevent. So it is a classroom management strategy. It's actually just a management strategy in general, because you could use it anywhere in the school, you could use it on the bus. I mean, wherever you need to, help students problem solve, we could use that. But it has so much more power if everyone in the school uses it, because you don't have to wonder in that moment, does my colleague know about the rule of one? Will they know what I mean when I say, can I help you? You don't have to worry about that if it's part of your shared practice toolkit that the whole school uses the rule of one. And that can be so powerful. So it is a tier 1 strategy, but will we use it in some tier 3 moments? We sure will. So that's, I don't know what part of your question I'm answering, but that I think is super powerful to do shared practices that everybody knows. And that really can change classrooms with like a little bit of effort. It really just takes, maybe some staff meetings, some PLCs where you kind of talk about it, talk about case scenarios, commit to it, and just bring it back up a few times until it becomes habitual. And then it's part of your school culture. New staff come in, and one of your onboarding is, hey, we have some school-wide practices that we do. We have a shared practices toolkit, and these are the things we'd like you to know. We use the rule of one and whatever other things you have. I mean, another shared practice could be we greet students by name and we use names as often as we can in talking to students, whether it's in the hallway or calling them in class, because names are a powerful part of our identity and help students feel seen and valued at school. That's a beautiful preventative shared practice that doesn't take much effort. You don't have to buy anything for any of these practices, right? Actually, all the stuff I teach, I would never be like, you have to buy a bunch of stuff to be able to do it, right? That would be really silly. So I don't know if you have any thoughts or questions on that, but I can move into a different part of the question. But does that make sense? That sound good?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
So another part of your question, you had mentioned like tier 1 versus tier 3. And I think that's a really smart thing to think about. And often when I go in to do classroom management consultation or even training about classroom management, one of the first things I talk about is the first thing we have to do is get good at noticing if we have a tier 1 issue or a tier 3 issue. And I kind of, for this, I kind of skip tier 2. Tier 2 is important also, but I kind of skip it just for this like analogy. A tier 1 issue would be like a systems issue, more of like an adult thing that, not that it's a problem, but like something you could improve that would help all of the students, versus a tier 3 issue, which I would actually call an individual student situation. So sometimes I'm asked for, and it happens both ways. I'm either asked for an individual kind of consult and I go in, I'm like, it's actually not about the student. It's really more of like adult choices that are being made. And if we change some of those, we could address it at the tier 1 level. And it actually is much less effortful, I think, for staff to work on doing things for all students rather than I have to do this strategy for this student and this strategy for this student and this strategy for this student. That's really hard to keep up with. That's really hard to keep up with. So whenever I can say, you know what, it might not be an issue, like you might, as you know, a teacher might not be doing something wrong, but I can say, you could adjust how you're running this part of your classroom, or you could adjust the way that you're saying this or the system that you're using for this. And it would just capture all the students, including the students who are having this issue. And it would just be easier for you. So I always think about, is this a tier 1 or is this a tier 3? And what would be the easier thing for the teacher to do? Sometimes I come from the other direction and say, hey, you called me in for classroom management. It isn't about classroom management. This teacher has got it. They have all these beautiful things. And it really is about this student issue. So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to help you work on a plan for this student. And it really, I wouldn't say it happens one way or the other more frequently. It just is a constant discussion of, is this something we should do for all students, or is this truly an individualized plan for this student? So that's kind of a constant discussion that I'm having. What parts of your question did we not get to? Anything else to answer there? I think I didn't get it all.
No, I thought you did.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
The question I have, though, which I'm actually, it wasn't even so much a question. I had this question, but you started to answer it, which I like, was about that, the fact that what happens when a school has you come in saying, this is what we want to work on, but that's not their issue.
Yeah.
And you see it differently, and you want to help them see that part. How does that go? How does those conversations usually go for yourself when you're looking in those? So it's like, example being there, you want to say it's classroom management. Teacher, they're like, our referral's gone up. We're looking at it this way. We think there's not consistency in the implementation process of what we're asking for of students for expectations. You come in though, and you look through it all and you go, it's really not that. The expectations are there. Yeah. Consistency is there. The issue is we don't have any sort of tiered MTSS for when a student is behaving or behaving inappropriately. What do we do first? Tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. How do you get that school to make that shift and understand that point that this is really where your focus should be, not what you think your focus is?
Yeah, that's a great question. As you were saying it, I'm like thinking back, like, have I ever had a conversation with a school where they were like, absolutely not, we're not on the same page? I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think I have. That I don't know if I know what my own magic is to tell you how I do it, but somehow, I think maybe because I take a data-based approach to everything. I mean, I think it's kind of crazy when we don't. Yeah. So I think because I take a data-based lens, I don't just say like, this is my opinion, right? I'm able to say like, hey, on the observations that I did, or, given that you brought this up and then the two teachers also who I met with brought this up and I saw it in the hallway, here's what I'm thinking that you probably need. And I don't know, I personally haven't had any trouble getting leaders or even, district to see where I think would be a good idea to go. Maybe it's that the people who didn't agree with me didn't end up hiring me, so I'm not remembering any like conversations that didn't go that way. But yeah, I think because I take that data-based approach to say like, here's why, it's not just like Mari's opinion of like why I think we should do this. I'm coming to those discussions with a lot of research-based understanding already about the topic or the pattern of behavior or whatever it might be. And so often, as much as we want to think we all are unique, we also have so much commonality that, the issues you're having in your schools from a leader perspective are not going to be different than other schools. And I say that with, of course, every school is unique and going to have, special things about it, but I'm not going to be surprised by the issues that schools are having, because if you're having them, other schools are having them too. And so I think I'm able to kind of bring it to, hey, I'm working with a lot of schools on this and here's what I see. And they're like, yes, that's us too. And then that lends kind of like weight to my guidance that I can, because I'm coming to it educated and prepared with what we're talking about, not just saying like, hey, I have like 3 things I like training, let me see if I can get you to buy one of those. I'm really coming to it from like, I have this information about education in general and about your topic specifically. Like I really wouldn't engage in a discussion with a district about something I wasn't an expert in. Like you're not going to call PD Monster for my opinion in math curriculum, because we're more mental health, behavior. We do some stuff. We do academic stuff. Absolutely. I do a lot of like differentiation, a lot of classroom management. There are certain things I do, academic wise and instruction wise, but there are some things that we just wouldn't be talking about, something that I didn't already have knowledge in. And that's just my choice as a presenter. I mentioned that before. Like I'm not going to put myself in a situation where I can't be the expert, because you're paying good money for expert guidance and I owe you that. So I am very careful. And that probably comes from my psychology training of like, as a psychologist, you are ethically bound to practice within your domain of expertise. And so if someone wanted to come to me, not that I don't do private practice, but if someone, just for hypothetical example, wanted to come to me for something that I don't know how to engage in as a therapist, it's my ethical duty to say, I don't do that. I'm not just going to be like, I'll try it. Like that wouldn't be healthy for them. And so same thing as a presenter, as a trainer, as a coach, whatever role I'm in, I ethically only operate within areas that I feel like I could confidently say, yes, I have expertise in that area. So I think that's what helps those conversations go well. And I guess what I would say to your leaders is, if you're working with someone for professional development who is not presenting as an expert, like best move on, I think, right? Because your staff deserves expert. They already know stuff in whatever arena you're going to teach them. They already know stuff, just like you guys already know stuff, right? So we don't want to send them someone who can't give them fresh ideas, new ideas. And I think that's really, really important.
So Dr. Wrightington, I'm so glad you said that last piece, because as you were speaking, I was thinking of our TikTok audience, and I can just hear them or imagine them saying things like, we have the expertise in the building. We don't need to hire outside people to tell us things we know. You should just pay us to provide our own professional development. We're the experts. We don't want to hear from what I hear. This is what I hear the most. We don't want people who quit on teaching to come in and teach us through theory. We're in the classrooms, we know. And that is obviously not all teachers, and it certainly isn't all of our comments, but I've been seeing that so often that it is, I mean, it's a little concerning to me, but what would be your response to that?
Yeah. Okay. So first I would say, do it, try it. Right. If staff say, because honestly, that's how I started PD Monster was, that's how I became an administrator. I was like, I could fix some of these systems. Like you probably do. All of you have people in your buildings with expertise that they haven't had an opportunity to share. So my first line would be, try it, do it. And you want to craft it carefully. Right. But I think I already said this tonight is, PD does not have to be an outside presenter, one and done, everyone in the cafeteria learning the same thing together. It can be so much more creative than that. There are lots of different things we can do. And one of the things I would list that you can do is share small bits of expertise so that everyone can share something eventually. I think that's a brilliant thing to do. So the first thing I would say to your leaders is don't say no to that just by default, right? That might be a beautiful thing to do. It might be a piece of an initiative. It might be a big piece of an initiative where we're, who knows what, where we're doing, facilitated, strategy guidance, where we're visiting each other's classrooms, where we're having small learning groups about different strategies or topics or whatever. Yes, do it. But just like we talked about before, when sometimes leaders feel like they could do all the PD, there's sometimes reasons to not be the person doing it, right? And your staff shouldn't always be. Sometimes we do want a new voice. I mean, you could for 5 years use up all the staff expertise in the building, but still there would be something out there that wasn't brought to the table. So sometimes it's just the new voice. Speaking for myself, as I've been sharing with you kind of my process of, diving into the research, you're not going to ask your teachers to do that. If you're saying, yeah, I'd like you to, let's each share a strategy. You're not going to say, but you have to, become an expert and you have to go to 6 trainings and you have to read 2 books and 16 articles before you present. That wouldn't be fair, but it is an okay ask of me. Not that you'd ask me, I would just do that. Right. But, so I think, that's my answer is yes, say yes to that. Try it, do it. It should be a piece of professional development always is capitalizing on the expertise in the building. I think that's a beautiful thing to do, but then talk about and think about when is it time for what topics and at what point in the initiative is it time for a different voice, a different perspective, maybe some coaching following up from the initial learning that they did. There's some research that I lean on all the time when I'm talking to leaders about professional development. And I learned it years ago. The statistics are kind of shocking, but when we listen to a training, just, like a one and done, the implementation is about 10% of stuff gets improved up. It's actually up to 10%. It's not very good. It's really low level implementation from one and done PD. But when we have PD plus coaching, feedback, follow-up conversations, and that doesn't have to be from the trainer. That's something I do offer through PD Monster. We're always happy to do that because we want to be part of a larger initiative. When we do that, so PD, the more traditional that we think of, plus feedback, follow-up, coaching, all of that, we can get up to, it's like 90 something. I forget the exact number now. It's 95% implementation. Nothing's ever 100, right? But we can get really, really high over, but it's that plus time. It's PD plus coaching, plus feedback, plus follow-up conversations, plus time. We have to give, just like with students, right? Nothing happens overnight. Nothing improves 0 to 100 overnight. But over time, that is what changes and improves implementation of anything that we're trying to do, is all of that plus time.
So I have a question for you, because I know, as you said, that most of your areas, that not all, but a lot of yours deals with whether it's classroom management, dealing with behavioral.
Yep.
We know that many schools, and this is not something new, but I think a lot of schools are leaning on this more often, are BCBAs and RBTs.
Mhm.
How do you help schools utilize them more efficiently? Because
Yeah.
I won't say this happens a lot, but probably in your time working, many RBTs get used as paraprofessionals. They're not
Mhm.
used to the fullest level of what they can do. BCBAs sometimes are not used to the fullest level of what they can do and what they offer. How do you
Yeah.
help schools? Because I think it is something that not all schools understand and not all staff understands,
Yep.
how they can be instruments for improvements inside of buildings.
Yeah, absolutely. So our BCBAs and our RBTs, and I'm going to take a cue from you and define those acronyms. So our board certified behavior analysts and our registered behavior technicians, they have expertise that others don't necessarily have. And I'm saying necessarily because some people might, I don't know, obviously, your staff, every school staff. So you might have some people with behavior science knowledge, but human behavior science is its own field. And sometimes those are our only people in the building who have any training regarding human behavior science. And human behavior science, especially in modern education, is an absolutely necessary skill for at least some of your staff members to have, because we are having a behavior epidemic in America, in schools. Behavior is tough. Student behavior is the reason my phone rings, really. Right? Other reasons too, but student behavior is a big one. So those individuals, our BCBAs and our RBTs, have a really important skill set to contribute. But my answer to your question of how do I help them be utilized in the best way possible, my answer, I don't know if this will surprise you or not, but it's actually in training all of the staff in at least a little bit of behavior science knowledge. Because what I hear from BCBAs and RBTs is there's sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes one of the barriers is a lack of understanding of why this specific prompt needs to be used, or this specific behavior plan was written, or this specific reinforcement is being used. And so I think when the whole staff, everyone, right, teachers, paraprofessionals, leaders, have a little bit of understanding about behavior science, that can help the strategies that are being written and prescribed really take hold, because we don't then ignore, well, I'm not going to do that little piece of it. That seems silly. We truly, all kind of have the same understanding about behavior science and can then all kind of like row in the same direction to support students. And I really would say that about any role you asked about is everyone has a specific role to play, and we're all kind of, I don't like to think about, I was about to say the word cog, and that sounds like I don't want any educator to feel like they're just like one little turning wheel, but just for the sake of this analogy, our system won't work unless we're each kind of like turning our wheels, right? Like that we're each playing our part. And so for behavior improvement to happen in buildings, whether it's for a classroom through classroom management strategies, or whether it's for an individual student through a behavior plan or informal behavior strategies, everyone needs to play their part. So, an RBT, BCBA, school psychologist, whoever might write that plan, but then teachers have a certain role to play in implementing that plan. Paraprofessionals might have a particular role to play in, all different parts. There's data collection, there's prompting, there's instruction with behavior plans. And so I guess, like everyone needs to play their own part. And I think for our behavior scientists, whatever job title they have, to be able to affect change, everyone needs to do their implementation piece. And so I would say if a school called me and said, our BCBAs and RBTs aren't aren't, doing very well, meaning their stuff isn't working or it's not taking hold. One of the first things I would ask about is implementation. Have you ever done any behavior science training? And it might have been called that, right? So I would kind of use, various terms when I'm talking to a team for the first time to kind of understand where they're coming from. One of my favorite things to train is it's kind of my packaging of behavior science, because I work with schools all the time who don't have a BCBA or RBT. And I was a school psychologist, so I know that school psychologists may have a lot of behavior science training and may not. And that's just a difference in school psychology programs, right? That someone might have had, yep, I've had 16 courses in that. I am an expert, let me at it. And others might be like, I wrote one behavior plan in grad school. So I don't really care what the job title is. I care about how comfortable do you feel doing this? Do you feel like an expert, or do you need to enhance your expertise? But I think behavior is one of the things that every human who works in schools should have some sort of training in, some sort of awareness at least, so that they can all put their oars in the water and row. And so one of my favorite things to train is, my training is called a 5-step approach to addressing challenging behaviors. And it's just my interpretation, or PD Monster's interpretation, of the behavior science that has existed for hundreds of years, that, I'm just saying, okay, let's package behavior science in a way that people without high level behavior science training, because BCBAs have a vocabulary that we don't have. I'm not a BCBA. I was a school psychologist. So I don't, sometimes they'll say a word. I'm like, wait, what's that again? Like, that's not what I need to train everyone in. I need to train everyone in just understanding why kids behave the way that they do, and then what to do about it. And there is a prescription for that.
Thank you.
So
sure.
I just wanted to say, because the Super Bowl just happened, as you were saying that, I just kept thinking of Bill Belichick. We're in New England, so whether you like the Patriots or not, Bill Belichick is a pretty important sports figure here. But his mantra, "Do your job," right? And just knowing your job and doing your part. And I know we're trying to shy away from the cog image, but just that piece of, look, this is your job. This is the part that you are asked to do. This is where you are the specialist. This is the thing that you have to do in order for the next person to be able to do their thing. Like, everybody do your job, and maybe you'll win 8 Super Bowls.
Yeah, no, that's a great analogy. Exactly. Yep. Everyone do your job. And if we all do our jobs, everything works.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's what I would do, is try to help a school find, if this is an issue, and it might not be someone's not doing their job. It might not be, we haven't given anyone that job to do. That's a lot of systems design, is who could do that for us, right? So that's a lot of my work with schools, is figuring out where the breakdown is in the system, and either shoring it up, putting a piece of tape on it, training someone to do it better, whatever it might be. But yeah, it is that. I'm going to use that. Do your job. That's what it's about, is we all come with different roles. And that's why I always, when I say the term educator, I try to remember to say, hey, I'm using that term inclusively, because teachers are not the only ones in education, right? There's lots of different roles. Teachers are a very important one, but everyone's important. Everyone has to do their job so that things work and students improve. And if we only had teachers, think of how much we'd be missing, right? And all of those roles are super, super important. And teachers need our support, right? They need the support of all of the different players, because they're doing a very hard job with 25 kids in front of them all day, every day. I always tell teachers why they're so exhausted. I can tell you why. It's not just one reason, but one of the main reasons. And this will, if any of I don't know if either of you were, I was a theater kid, or if any of your audience members are, and were you, Des? Did you do theater as a kid?
I was an English teacher, so
so you have a lot of.
I put on the school plays.
Yeah, exactly. So right, And you know that like buzz that you get after performing, like you're like wired, but you're exhausted. It's because you're not being yourself. You're in a character. You're holding your body different. You're using your voice differently. You're projecting more. And so kids are exhausted, but also hyper and crazy. And that's how teachers are at the end of the day, because they are performing for 7 hours a day. They are not using their true personality that they use when they are at home comfortable with their family. Yes, their personality still shines through, but they're holding their body different. They're using their voice different. So that is one of the reasons why we're so exhausted in education, is we're performing for students for 7 hours a day. Like, that's a lot of performing. That's, our Broadway stars only do a couple hours a day, right? And they're professionals, like who sing and project and act and hold their body for a living. And we're doing it without acknowledging that we're literally performing, and it's exhausting. And that's why one of my other favorite things to train is self-care for educators. Because I think, and I know some people will roll their eyes when they hear that, but let me just can I give it 10 seconds here? Like, self-care, I think, for educators is, and building off what I just said, it needs to be unique, and it needs to be deep for educators because of the hard jobs that we have. When I teach self-care, I often call it something like, I just did one recently and I called it Beyond Bubble Baths, Practical Self-Care for Educators, because I think there's a kind of misconception about self-care that it means relaxation, work-life balance. Those things are important. Relaxation is hugely important to the human body. We have to relax. We have to get out of work life and balance that with just life sometimes, and have some of that be pleasure and, relaxation. But that's not self-care. That's just balance. That's being human. Self-care for an educator, I think, is much more deep than take care of yourself after work. It's emotion regulation training. It's self-awareness training, because you're on stage and then with people throwing things at you all day, right? And how do you keep yourself grounded and calm in the face of screaming children, things being thrown at you, swearing, angry parent on the phone, administrator knocking on your door that they need something, 2 meetings to go to, but you haven't planned that lesson? Like, it's truly an impossible job that, millions of us have signed up to do. And self-care is, bubble baths don't last you, right? Or whatever your relaxation thing is, like, put that in your head, whatever your relaxation thing is. Whether it's, bubble bath with a glass of wine, or, pizza and friends and football, like, whatever your relaxation thing is it going to last you, 15 hours to the next day when all of those things are flying at you, all of the emotions, all of the actual objects that are flying at you, the angry parents, the, expectations, all of that? It's not. A bubble bath will help you zero amount. It will help you zero amount. So that's not self-care. Does that make sense? Like, it's relaxation and self-care to me. And someone else might have a different opinion, but this is Mahri's opinion, that self-care is deep. Self-care for educators is emotion regulation and self-awareness and a bunch of other things that come along with that, where we have to do deep work to be able to perform for 7 hours a day in chaos. So I had to get that in somewhere. I wanted to talk about that. I think it's super important.
No, I think it's a great statement. I like the fact of that idea of you're performing while people are throwing things at you at the same time.
Yeah.
It kind of is true. Like, like you said, you're giving a performance, but while you're giving performance, there are 1,001 things that get in the way of the performance, and you have to be able to move, adapt, respond, and be able to keep going. So it is more than just saying, it's more than the pizza and the on Friday in the in their planning room, or saying to everyone, we're giving you an hour back for your own time during PLC time, or bringing a yoga teacher in, or bringing like massages on one day. Those are all great. But
they are great, and I want to say, don't stop doing
thing.
Yeah, those are wonderful because they're fun. It's pleasure. It's relaxation. those are important too. Those are important, right? But when we say self-care and we're talking to educators, you hit it. It's more than that. It's deeper than that because of the hardship of the job. Yeah.
Agreed. Mahri, it has been over an hour that flew by quick. Thank you so much for joining us. We always like to ask one final question. If you have any advice for administrators when it comes to professional development, what would it be?
Okay. I'll try to think of something I haven't said, but I think it might be just a reiteration of something I've said. Let me see if I can come up with some magic. I think I'm going to have to stick with the bigger picture, that we're wasting our time if we're not thinking big picture, we're not thinking end result, and we're not thinking, how do I, meaning the leader, how do I play a role in this so that we have systemic change over time? And I can't speak for all PD presenters, but that's the discussion you would have with me. And I would encourage you, if you're listening to this and not working with PD Monster, that is perfectly fine. There's tons of trainers out there, but ask those questions. Like, how can I fit this into the larger initiative? And I think, given what we talked about before about, people hating PD, let's keep that in mind too, and ask those questions. Like, what things do you avoid doing? I would ask any trainer that. What things do you avoid doing? Because I would say things that you already said. I think, Marco, you said them at the beginning, like icebreakers. I don't do them. I just don't do them. I sometimes say to a crowd, I'm not going to go around and have you say all of your names because I won't remember them. And it's going to be a waste of our time. What I will do is when people are talking, like if you are in my audience and raise your hand, Marco, I might be like, oh, tell me your name, so that when I'm talking to you, I can use your name. But when we, start trainings like that, we've already lost our audience. So I would, my advice to administrators is, big picture initiative, big picture your role, and big picture ask the right questions before you hire someone. Make sure that they are coming into it aligned with your vision, aligned with your values, and that you're not stepping into something that your teachers are going to hate before they even get into the room. That's what I would say.
Thank you. And again, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. As we say every time, like, this is professional development for Des and I. We really just get a chance to enjoy speaking with individuals who are just doing great things in education from across the nation. So we're very happy to have had you here today talking with us. Des, any final words?
No, just that we really enjoyed this conversation. Definitely some things to think about. Thank you for sharing some strategies that people can look to start to implement immediately. I'm sure that those who are listening appreciate. I know I appreciate. And we've got to be planful and purposeful. Again, thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Dr. Wrightington, anywhere they can find you, whether it's through your email, through your website, you want to give a little plug to your information?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks. So you can find everything about PD Monster and me at pdmonster.com. That will have I won't bother sharing our email directly. You can find it on the website. So everything's at pdmonster.com. The best thing to learn, I think, what is in our wheelhouse at PD Monster is on our website, if you click on live webinars at the top, I pretty much, if I have expertise in an area, I'm running a training on it. So the webinars is only one thing that we do. Obviously, I talked mostly today about contracting directly with schools, which I'd love to do. But an easy way to get to know us is just scan my webinar list for this school year. Once I run one, I don't take it off the website. I just say the date has passed, because I often tell people, like, go see what I do. Like, these are the topics that I feel like an expert in. If there's something there that you are hoping to work with me on and it's not listed, of course, ask, and rest assured, I will tell you if we're not comfortable doing it. And I'm not the only trainer. We have others that we work with at PD Monster. I'm the primary one, but if it's something outside of my wheelhouse, but I have a colleague who does it, we can hook you up with them. So yeah, please reach out. You can find me at pdmonster.com. We have social media as well, PD Monster Co. on Instagram, but I think our website's probably the best place to find us. So thank you for letting me plug that.
Awesome. So again, thank you so much for coming on today. Des, as always, great having these conversations with you on a Friday. With that, school's out.
You all will be missed. Until then, I gotta blow you a kiss. Until we meet again on that other side, this my rhyme. We all love you to the end of this time, always. Know this, you all will be missed. Until then, I gotta blow you a kiss. Until we meet again on that other side, this my rhyme. We all love you to the end of this time, always.